Hey everyone, Spite here. Today I'm going to be going through a step-by-step guide for rushing to Tier 3, hence the video title. Spoiler alert, we actually are able to get a Titan up before the 20-minute mark, but this video is a little bit more about the journey rather than the destination. I made this because I feel like there's a good amount of content available on rushing nukes or bombers or some other early game strategy, but I personally feel that those are often to the detriment of your team. And what I mean by that is while these strategies do a great job of effectively resetting one opponent back to the Stone Age, they don't actually allow much flexibility if you need to pivot to help out your team members. What's more, if you are successful, your bombers do hit their mark or your nuke smacks the backline, your opponents will often drop everything and build some fighters or some anti-nukes. So, long story short, if your early rushes are often effectively nullified after your hand is revealed. With that being said, having tier 3 on the field means a couple of things. First, having sustainable firepower that is very tough to counter. A Titan's going to have an easy work of any tier 1 or tier 2 units, and those tier 1 and tier 2 units are going to have a tough time contending with a Titan. The second point, and probably the more important one, is that you likely will have a very strong economy by the time you get to tier 3. More often than not, barring some kind of tactical blunder or oversight, the stronger economy wins the game. Looking at any metrics at the end of the games, more often than not, the team with a stronger economy wins. Now looking at the charts on screen, these are just a recent example of a match that I played. You can see the metal used on the left and the energy used on the right. It's very clear that the red team, or I guess more comparatively, the blue team fell behind as far as their resource consumption was concerned. So with that being said, it comes as no surprise to anyone just looking at these charts that the blue team faltered and the red team prevailed. So today we're going to focus on getting that economy established on a very popular map, Supreme Strait. Now I feel like this applies to many maps, but this is just a more traditional frontline backline map. You'll notice that I don't really pivot to the staples of a mature map state. And what I mean by that is you'll notice that I don't pivot to fighters, AA, anti-nukes, or essentially any deviations that takes me away from my build order. So if you do use this guide, make sure that you communicate with your team about your intentions. For this map, you definitely want to make sure that your eco partner in the back line knows that they're responsible for providing support to your teammates, and this usually means fighters and anti-nukes. So with that being said, we're going to jump into some live in-game footage that I recorded earlier today. For time's sake, I'm going to speed this up to 2x, and if you have any kind of questions or you missed something, then I encourage you to pause the video, maybe rewind it a second or two to see what you missed. But I'm going to first start off by building 2 mexes, 2 wind turbines, and go straight into a bot lab. The overall goal is to, before this tier 2 launch, is to make sure I get my Lazarus up, or my reclaim bot, to get that energy, as well as 2 tier 1 constructors. The goal before we get that tier 2 bot lab up is about 30 wind turbines, and I think I did around 6 energy converters. It's really important to make sure that you're really microing your units to ensure that they're getting optimal pathing, build orders, and whatnot, and that includes starting out with an early construction bot off the rip, or construction turret, I should say. This is just really going to increase our build power, and I make sure that I'm very attentive to where I place it in the map. I like to position it right in the middle of all 3 of those primary mexes, so whenever I do upgrade to tier 2, it will be a smooth transition with that extra build power for that extra metal income. So as always with early game kind of eco strategies, you are going to self-destruct your commander, which you will see in a little bit. When I first tried this strategy at tier 3 rush, I think I was able to get it around 17, 15, or 17 and a half minutes, but that was before the recent commander update, so I think we did lose some metal that we're able to reclaim off the commander, so that definitely had a detrimental effect on the ability to kind of early rush any eco strategies. So you can see that I've got my wind turbines up, and as I transition into tier 2, you'll notice that I'll start to kind of break down these wind turbines. While they do provide good metal to energy ratios, they're really volatile, and I can't have that volatility, especially in some kind of eco rush. So as you can see right there, I did self-destruct my commander. I'm not lagging anything. And in fact, there's actually a pretty big blunder on my end with the metal excess that you can see here. So I need to find out where that took place exactly, but I think that was the only metal that I ended up wasting, which is pretty big at this moment. So I'm sure that there's a way that you can optimize this strategy even further. So as the metal goes down, I start to reclaim my commander, send that Lazarus off on the top right of the screen, and then go ahead and start building my tier 2 constructor. As we're starting to stall metal again, we're going to break down that tier 1 bot lab, and that's going to just give us a little bit more metal to work with. And again, kind of harping back on my previous video, you really want to make sure that you're attentive to managing your three resources, which is your metal and energy, which you can both see are pretty healthy at this map state. And so I know when both of them are healthy, it's time to invest in a little bit of build power, which is why I built that additional construction turret. So always prioritize getting your mexes upgraded. Is just metal is often the bottleneck, and the sooner you can get metal production online, the sooner that you'll be able to reap those rewards. You can kind of see this transition taking place here that I alluded to earlier, is that I'm wanting to essentially transition to a stable solar economy, transition out of that early T1, start going into a little bit more advanced T1 economy. And that's kind of what my previous video was all about, is the efficiencies between these different tiers of economy. So if we're able to get out of wind, get out of solar, and get into fusion, and ideally advanced fusion as quickly as possible, it really gets our economy or metal and energy investments working that much better for us. So you can see as I'm sending off these bots to go finish up that fourth and final mechs, I'm investing in kind of future build power, future metal storage. I know metal storage is going to be something that I'm going to look to integrate in a little bit, especially if I have to break down an advanced, or not an advanced, but a regular fusion reactor, as well as a tier 2 bot lab. So that's something to definitely consider whenever you're doing any kind of eco rush or eco minded in the back line, is that you always want to kind of think 2 or 3 steps ahead, begin with the end in mind, so to speak. And part of that includes making sure that your resource storage capabilities are up to par. One thing I do like to do when I'm playing the backline is I do like to build those tier 2 reclaim bots. They just provide an extra amount of little build power if I have excess metal and energy, and I don't want to allocate a bot to build a construction turret. I'll build those little reclaim bots and just kind of get a walking construction turret, so to speak. And so with that being said, I produce one, and then if I'm ever stripped for metal, I'll either send them to the front line to reclaim metal, or I'll just reclaim them on the back line. So you can see as we're transitioning into this fusion reactor right here that I do go ahead and reclaim the tier 2 bot lab. So at this point, you're pretty vulnerable, right? You don't have any production facilities for units. If your constructors get blown up or anything, then you're going to have to beg someone for another constructor. So this is definitely the most vulnerable state, is probably this 11 minute mark. So nonetheless, if we had to, and this is what I was alluding to in the introduction, if we had to, we could certainly pivot out of this rush, invest this metal that we have into some bot labs, and start pumping out some tier 2 units if the front line was really struggling. But if frontline is holding, if the 2C players are holding, and no one's raging at you too hard, then I'm totally in favor of continuing the eco grind head down, and certainly you'll be able to reap the benefits here in a few minutes. So with that being said, I really like to create three regular fusion reactors, and make sure that we have the supporting converters before we transition into those advanced fusion reactors. Those are just so energy and metal dense, and there's such a big investment that we want to make sure that we have the supporting economy for those new buildings. So I always like to build converters at almost like a 2-to-1 ratio for regular reactors. So you can see I have five converters to 3 fusion reactors, and then for every advanced fusion reactor I like to have about 3 or 4 converters. And you'll see that as I transition into a tier 3 gantry, that that's kind of like an ideal ratio that I like to have. And you may notice as we're continuing through this kind of tutorial that the that I'll have my kind of be I'll also call it like leapfrogging, so to speak. So I'll have my tier 2 construction bot start on something, whether that be a reactor or a converter, and then I'll have him move on to the next project before that one's finally finished. So as long as you have a unit doing production, engaging with that construction project, as you can see here, then it's able to stay afloat, so to speak. So I don't really like burning time as far as unit pathing is concerned, especially if you're going ground units instead of air constructors. So you can kind of see this leapfrogging technique. I don't even know if that's what it's called, but that's what I like to call it. So with that in mind, just kind of make sure that you're optimizing your pathing, getting building started, and then moving that primary gatekeeper of that building tier to the next building project, so to speak. You can see that I have my tier 1 constructors are more or less idle at this point, so I'm going to have those kind of clean up the base a little bit. I'm kind of OCD when it comes to that, so making sure that we're just kind of cleaning up the base, getting rid of that tier 1 economy. I've said it once before already, but I'll say it again, that the tier 2 economies and the higher level economies are just so much more efficient that you really want to start investing in them heavily. So and you can kind of see that transition taking place. I'm opting to essentially take the metal out of those regular fusion reactors, invest those in essentially firepower at this point. So maybe that's another resource I could have included on the previous video, but essentially allocating that metal away from energy production and towards sustainable frontline firepower, so to speak. So I'm sure there's a lot of ways that you can optimize this guide, and I know I don't have the perfect build order here by any stretch of the imagination, but nonetheless, we're able to get a Titan out around the 1830, 1840 mark. So I've been in many games where the majority of the player base is still in a tier 1 economy or still have tier 1 units on the field. So I promise if you're able to get a Titan up to the front line, especially on Supreme Straight, by the 19-20 minute mark, it's certainly going to have a positive impact. And so I'll let this kind of play out a little bit further, and you can kind of see the exponential nature of growing an economy in the back line. Obviously, you want to continue building units and that kind of thing, but I think by like the 20, maybe 21 minute mark, I already have 4 or 5 advanced fusion reactors up. That might be an exaggeration, but I'll speed up the rest of the video and let it play out. But thank you all so much for watching this video. Please let me know if you have any suggestions in the comments below, anything else you would like me to do. Hopefully I'll have some more interesting insights and builds and that kind of thing coming out in the future. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.